Morning. I'm Congresswoman Meng. It's great to be here with all of you. Feel free to turn on your cameras, and when it is your turn to speak as a panelist, someone will unmute you. But really just so grateful to be here with all of you. We've gathered this morning, obviously, to talk about this crucial subject of internet access here in New York State. A subject that is among the most pressing and urgent issues of our time, especially highlighted during COVID. I've been proud to work on this effort in Congress, but what I really wanted as an alum of the New York State Legislature, I wanted to highlight the great work that I've seen many of my colleagues in our state legislature work on. They have worked on this issue locally, from here in Queens to all around the great state of New York. And so that's really the purpose. We wanted to try to connect all the dots of all the elected officials who are working on this on both the state and the federal level. I'm really thrilled to have here with us the new chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, Jessica Rosenworcel. She and I have worked closely together, actually even before COVID started, on increasing access to the internet, and even before she rose to the top spot at the FCC. And this continues to be a top priority for her and her agency. And I'm so grateful for her and her team. And I wanted to show her off to you guys here in New York, and also to show off my state colleagues to the chairwoman as well. So I think it's just really critical for us as we tackle these issues to have a platform all together as much as we can for people who've worked on this issue. And it's an honor to bring all of you together. I don't have to tell all of you, internet connectivity is part of our daily lives and vital to success in our 21st century. Much like electricity was important in the 1930s, affordable internet access will be the same, if not more. Many years ago, actually before COVID, I started working on this issue, having traveled a bit around the country, visiting many people in more rural communities, and had started advocating for improved broadband upon hearing a lot of their stories. I had joined the House Task Force on Rural Broadband, chaired by our House Majority Whip, Jim Clyburn, where we have worked to increase internet access to many rural communities in digital deserts. We have also worked to improve the unreliable, unaffordable, and slow connections often experienced in rural communities that don't have internet access. And then I worked on launching an effort to improve connectivity for our school children. As a mom of 2 young kids, this is an issue that breaks my heart. I mean, nearly 17 million students in our country today live in homes without any internet connection. As more teachers are providing assignments requiring the internet at home. When my kids first started school, I asked my son to take out his textbook. And he laughed at me. He said, "Mom, we don't have textbooks anymore. Everything's online. You go to the website." And so it just really highlights the importance. Back in 2019, I had introduced a bill to fund mobile hotspot lending programs to help close this homework gap. And in 2020, when the pandemic forced our schools throughout New York and across the nation to transition to remote learning, the situation demanded immediate action. I had pushed for more resources to help our students connect to their virtual classrooms, introduced a different bill aimed at providing money for schools and libraries for Wi-Fi hotspots, modems, routers, internet-connected devices, and internet service. I want to highlight the work of Massachusetts Senator Ed Markey, who I worked with to introduce the Senate version of my bill. And after a tough fight, we still had people to convince, but we were able to secure more than $7 billion for this effort in the American Rescue Plan. So we've already seen the first round of funding being dispersed, which included more than $1.2 billion for some 3,000 schools and libraries to connect over 3.6 million kids around the country. And millions of these dollars have flowed to schools in New York State, as some of you have seen. We are now working on getting $40 billion over the next 5 years to continue funding for hotspots and internet equipment so that students and libraries have online access well after this coronavirus pandemic ends. I've worked to secure $300 million that I fought to include in our Build Back Better Act, which is now pending before the Senate. During the pandemic, we have all seen how critical internet access has been. Students without the internet at home have had to find public venues to provide free Wi-Fi or literally not be able to participate in class and not be able to do their homework. And it's unacceptable in New York and throughout this country that this lack of connectivity continues to be such a huge obstacle to kids getting education in our country and state. So internet access is not just important to learning, as we've seen, but also to people who might be applying for a job, making important purchases, or simply connecting with family, friends, and their healthcare workers. And it's been vital to our economy. But you know, our kids are our future. We have to make today the necessary investments to ensure that our next generation's success, which in turn ensures the future success of our nation. Now, I'm super excited to turn the program over to our wonderful chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel. She is no stranger to New York State. She grew up in Connecticut and graduated from New York University Law School. She became acting FCC chairwoman in January 2021, and the US Senate confirmed her for the position in December, making her the first female chair to permanently lead the agency in its almost 100-year history. Thank you, Chairwoman, for your leadership and commitment to this issue. And thank you so much for being here with us in New York today.
Oh, thank you so much, Congresswoman Meng. And thank you for being such a champion for ending the digital divide. And normally, like, I start a conversation like this by talking about how broadband's no longer nice to have, it's need to have for everyone, everywhere. But if you're on this call, I think I'd be preaching already to the converted, right? So, so let me just start it a little differently. So my favorite quote in the universe is from a New Yorker, from Brooklyn, not Queens, but it's the iconic Shirley Chisholm. She always says that if they don't give you a seat at the table, pull up a folding chair. And that's the advice I give to everyone working in public policy, because I think it's so necessary. But I want to talk a little bit about how our host did that today, because when Congressman Jim Clyburn, who's in House leadership, decided to pull together a rural broadband task force, we have a congresswoman from Queens who raised her hand and showed up. And let's all acknowledge that Queens, New York is not what we think of when we think of a rural broadband task force. But she pulled a chair up and said, if we're going to solve the digital divide in this country, we have to think about urban America and rural America. We have to think about access and affordability. And you know what? She was ahead of her time, because if you look at all the legislation that's been passed in this difficult COVID era that speaks to the digital divide, we have now initiatives to address both of those things. And she was one of the driving forces, as you heard with Senator Ed Markey, behind a program called the Emergency Connectivity Fund to end the homework gap. So every child gets a device and the home access they need to do their nightly schoolwork, so they're not locked out of the virtual classroom. She was one of the people behind our nation's largest ever broadband affordability program. We have running it out of the FCC. We have, it's called the Affordable Connectivity Program. We help low-income households on SNAP, Medicaid, free and reduced lunch programs at school get discounted internet service at home, which is something for decades we've been doing for voice telephony. But she, like a lot of her colleagues, recognized we now have to do that for broadband. And of course, we have all of these new rural broadband initiatives, many of which are being run out of the Department of Commerce, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Treasury, some at the FCC. And the task now is to coordinate, not just among federal agencies, but with state and local folks, which is what brings us to this discussion today. And so I want to learn from you what's going on in New York, a state I admit I used to call home. So I got a little bit of bias, but that's okay with this crowd. And I'd love to hear some more about what you've got going on.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. First, we will begin with a state senator from the second, I'm going to get in trouble here. I'm going to say the second best borough here in New York City, because we all know it's Queens, right, Neely and Leroy? State Senator Kevin Parker from Brooklyn, who I had the privilege of serving with many years ago in the state legislature, and who always continues to reach out whenever people are looking for help and support. So thank you, Kevin, for being here. Just kidding. We will save him for later if he's not here yet. Tell him I said something nice about him. Next, we have a state senator who so many of us look up to. He's also from my home borough of Queens, State Senator Leroy Comrie.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Congresswoman, for asking me to join this distinguished panel. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of the incredible work they're dealing with broadband connectivity around New York State and the things that I and my colleagues are doing. As mentioned, I'm honored to be the state senator for the 14th Senate District in Queens. And I also want to congratulate the first female chairwoman for the FCC, Mrs. Jessica Rosenworcel, for her appointment. So congratulations to you as well. It's a major accomplishment and it's well deserved. I'll try to be brief. I wanted to share with you just some of the bills that I'm working on and some of the issues that I'm aware of dealing with broadband, and also with the issues with some of the utilities. Now we have a bill, our Senate Bill S5855, which would establish a new article in the Public Services Law relating to wireless communication services in areas dealing with consumer, including consumer protection, service quality, emergency reporting, and ensuring universal service. The Public Service Commission would be empowered to oversee the continued development of the wireless service communications industry within its jurisdiction in accordance to a statewide wireless services plan, and set service quality standards, ensure compliance, receive and address consumer complaints, and enforce consumer protections. This bill would not infringe upon the FCC's jurisdiction. Instead, it would establish a statewide communication service policy in areas that are not federally preempted, including consumer protection, emergency reporting, and ensuring universal service. I also have two other bills, a bill, Senate Bill 4017, requesting, and I know other members have a bill similar, requiring free internet service in household with students who live at or below the poverty level. Directs broadband companies to install and upgrade broadband services in all educational facilities throughout New York State. Clearly, as you know, many students lack internet access, especially students in poverty areas and in rural areas, and it's important. There was a 2020 study that found 44% of New York City residents in poverty lack broadband access. We must make an effort to provide quality internet access to students and to schools without means, and to doing that without imposing any financial difficulty upon those schools and people that are impoverished. I also have another bill that would direct the Public Service Commission to formulate a process to develop rules and regulations for the charges of to deal with the charges and fees of internet and cable providers. There are a lot of unpredictable hidden fees that consumers are subject to. There are a lot of also issues that consumers have reached out to me about, and one of them being that they can't pay cash to these providers, and there's a penalty if they do pay cash to some of the providers. There are a lot of rules that need to be formulated and developed because they don't make sense at this particular time. We are also, dealing with the fact that we need to make sure that there was another 2020 study where we talked about dealing with making sure that internet access it should be treated like a utility, but it should also be regulated better like a utility. So hopefully with this and my colleagues, and I just want to mention, Congressmember, that I also joined the Senate's Agricultural Committee. That's just because Senator Michellehinchey is a great chair, but I also recognize that, you know, we need to make sure that we take care of our agricultural needs in the state. New York State has one of the richest agricultural territories in the country, and it's important for all of us senators, upstate and downstate, to do what we can to join ag. So as you join rural broadband, I joined the State Agricultural Committee because I recognize that we all have to work together to make this state better. Thank you, Congressman, and thank you for allowing me a few minutes to share what I'm doing in the New York State Senate.
Thank you so much, Senator Comrie. Next, we have State Senator Michellehinchey, who represents Greene and Montgomery counties and parts of Ulster, Schenectady, and Albany. Thanks so much, Senator, for being here and for your great work.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for convening all of us today, and Chairwoman for being here with us and spending some time learning about what we're doing here in New York. And I have to take a second to say, I need Senator Comrie on every panel and every committee with me, because if only we were so lucky to have every legislator and congressperson with that kind of foresight as both of you have to really fight for and understand the issues of our entire state. It's really heartwarming for me to have a partner in both of you. And I really appreciate all the work you do in reaching out and supporting your communities, as well as those more rural ones like I represent across those 5 counties. So thank you so much. Broadband, as we all know, and we're here, you're right, Chairwoman, preaching to the choir, but is one of the biggest issues that we are facing, especially in upstate New York. People often have to make the choice between going to work themselves, driving to work, or driving their child to a library parking lot to do their schoolwork. That is unacceptable. And thanks to everybody on this call and so many others for the work that all of you are doing to help make that impossible choice not a choice anyone has to make anymore. One of the things that I was really proud of, and I know Senator Ryan and others were instrumental in this as well, but in the budget, our budget last year, we got a household level mapping data study by the PSC. They are doing that, the PSC is doing that study right now. For the first time, we will have household level data. For too long, New York State leaders have said we have 95% coverage, or 98% coverage, excuse me. We know that number is not accurate because that's run by census tracts, and census tracts do not work in rural communities. So that household level data is critical for us to really understand the gaps and to help build out that last mile. A piece of legislation that I'm really proud to have passed last year with the help of Assemblymember Carrie Warner is making it easier for independent broadband companies to build that last mile. Independent broadband companies are typically the ones that are building out in more rural areas, but they also operate on grants. They have very finite budgets. And so when they have additional unforeseen costs, it makes that build out much more difficult and take a much longer time. And what we were seeing is utility companies were charging replacement fees, pole replacement fees for these broadband companies, as opposed to just the attachment fee. They were charging full replacement fees. As you know, that can cost anywhere from $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a pole. And when we're talking about building out that last mile in rural areas, that's a lot of poles to have to attach to. So that cost skyrockets pretty quickly. And so we passed a bill last year that makes it easier for those independent broadband companies to build out. It directs the PSC to come up with a more affordable way to work with utility companies for the attachments, as well as making it easier for broadband companies to negotiate the contracts. Right now, as I'm sure you know, they have to negotiate, or they did in New York, have to negotiate individual pole contracts to attach. What our bill does is actually say you can negotiate with one municipality to connect to all poles within that municipality. That will take a lot of time away that we can now actually spend in the build out, which is critically important. We also, two issues I do want to highlight. One that we are working on this year is repealing the right-of-way fees. Those fees we hear all the time are hindrances to actually building out broadband. And so it's nominal money for the state, but it's really big blockages to these companies to actually build out. The second piece is competition. Again, I'll speak to the rural area, the rural parts and kind of upstate New York parts, but we lack options, right? And so if it's only an independent broadband company that's going to be able to build out, if they do get saddled with additional costs or they don't have the manpower to be able to build out, you're out of luck. There's no one else who's going to be able to come in and help expand that. We also then, as everywhere, I mean, all of competition generally is a challenge, but it also allows these companies to skyrocket costs and to put the cost of build out onto consumers because they need the internet. We need to connect these homes, and people are being charged $30,000 just to run a wire across the street to their home. And they have no other choice but to take on that cost because that's what they're being told they have to do from the provider, and they have nowhere else to turn. So I think making sure and helping us with both funding as we have with the incredible infrastructure bill. Thank you for bringing that and having so much money for that last mile build out, but really ensuring and helping us put in place mechanisms that bring that money to that last mile build out. Because what we've also seen is oftentimes money that is allocated for those steps don't actually make it to those communities. So we have to do a better job of making sure that money really gets into the hands of the providers who are going to build out in rural areas, as well as figuring out how we can keep the costs of those, even in our suburban areas. I can talk for some of my more suburban areas. People have internet across the street. They don't have it on their side of the street, and they're being charged, as I said, $30,000 to get that wire attached to their house. They should not bear that brunt. They should not bear that cost. And so I hope to work with all of you to figure out how we can partner to make sure that cost stays with the companies as opposed to the people who are left without internet.
Thank you so much, Senator Hinchey. Next, we have State Senator Sean Ryan. I was fortunate to serve with him in the New York State Assembly, and great to see him in the State Senate. He represents parts of Buffalo and Western New York. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Great to see you today, and thank you for taking on this important issue. And to Chairwoman Rosenworcel, sorry about that. Thanks for the work that you've been doing, really targeting the digital discrimination and redlining that happens, and really for the host of other consumer protections that you've brought forward. So thank you for that. So we all want to close the gaps in broadband, in New York State and of course across the country. We want to focus on deployment, affordability, and then also creating high quality, resilient networks that serve us all. Last year, my legislation, the Comprehensive Broadband Connectivity Act, went through, and so we are now doing that household by household mapping of New York State, which is really going to help us determine how we deploy. For too long, we went on these anecdotes of, New York State has 95% connectivity, but that just flew in the face of our common knowledge. The next step is a bill that I have, and that would be to give New York State, the PSC unambiguous authority and a clear mandate to regulate broadband in order to achieve this goal of universal access. We need to make sure that consumers are protected in this. The last fall, Assemblywoman Rozic and I did a tour throughout New York State, and it was really shocking the areas of commonality between Queens and Lake Placid. And what do I mean by that? Well, at any given time in Queens, according to the comptroller's report, up to 30% of people don't have internet. And then you go to the more rural areas and up to 30-some% don't have internet. They don't have internet for different reasons, but just building out like we've done in Queens and Buffalo still leads up to a third of our population with no internet. And that's because there are no consumer protections added in. And that's why we really feel that the Public Service Commission should regulate internet as utility to give basic protections to the consumers. I'm at home today, as many of you are, but my spouse also works from home, but we can't both be in the same home and do internet. We both can't Zoom meetings. We pay for internet. We supposedly have internet service, but guess what? It doesn't work. We don't accept that in our electricity or our heating, gas, or if you have a landline, a telephone line. So I am in the statistic of somebody who has internet, but I'll tell you, I don't get what I'm paying for. I don't have quality service, but I can't go to the Public Service Commission and say, help, because they say we don't regulate internet, which leaves me then to go try to fight with a large major corporation to say, I'm not getting what I pay for. So I don't think I win that fight. And as you know, the Ninth Circuit has recently upheld a California law that banned internet service providers from blocking or slowing data. And it said that that's a valid exercise of state power. So it would be great if we had clear guidance from the federal government about states' power in this category. But I'll close by saying, we all know this. It's not a rural area only affected. It's not an urban area affected. Everyone found out during the pandemic that we have a problem with internet in all areas of our society, Republican, Democratic, rural, urban. In order to advance our economy and our society the way that we want, we need to have a transparent, accountable, equitable broadband services. So, thank you so much again, and thank you, Congresswoman, for getting the legislative perspective on this. I really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we have Assemblywoman Amy Paulin. I was fortunate to serve with her. She's an amazing legislator and was kind enough to invite me out to dinner when I first started in the New York State Assembly. Go ahead, Amy.
Thanks, Congresswoman. I knew even back then, as we were sharing food, that you would do great things. So I'm so happy and excited that you're taking on this broadband issue because we know even as everyone's already said, the challenges we faced as a result of COVID-19 have really highlighted the need for reliable, high-speed internet for broadband service for all of us, for remote work, for school, for all those times where our kids are homesick and we can't get to the office in order for us to really effectively go on with our lives. So my colleagues have really already said so much of what we're doing collectively. As the corporations chair, I was very proud to help advance Sean's study last year in our budget. He had, when he originally introduced that legislation, it was when he was an assembly member, and we could not get that much traction from the then governor's office. We made it a big priority for the assembly, even though he abandoned us and moved on to the Senate, because we knew from a study that my office had done that we could not, for the reasons Senator Hinchey pointed out, really get at the information we needed to know to assess house by house, whether it was infrastructure, affordability. I mean, we have connectivity issues. We have, the additional issue that Senator Ryan pointed out. We have high-speed ability for 2 or 3 or 4 people in the same household to use internet, and of course, infrastructure. So where those problems are really important to knowing how to address them. And I would say one of the reasons we were always given as an excuse not to do the study initially when we were trying to promote the senator's legislation was that the federal government is supposed to do this. And I don't know And that, every state may not be doing what New York is doing, a comprehensive study. So, to get to that granular data for the whole United States would be really critical. So I put that back on you. The prior administration had no interest, leave everything to the states, but tie our hands with the ability to regulate broadband, as the senator said. So we have done a little bit of, we have found a backwards way to help regulate some broadband, but clear guidance. I want to support that that statement from Senator Ryan would be very helpful, so that we know what we can do. Part of that comes back to the legislation, additional legislation we put in the budget, which was on affordability. We had put in our budget last year a requirement for a $15 plan or a $20 plan if there was high speed for eligible low-income households, and we were immediately sued saying that we didn't have jurisdiction. So to enable us to have some of the jurisdiction would allow us to implement programs in a much better way. So I'm going to stop there. I really appreciate that. Again, we have the opportunity to meet you, advocate for this collectively, and to thank the Congresswoman for hosting and putting this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Now we give the floor to my colleague right here in Queens and in my district as well, Assemblywoman Rozic.
Thanks so much, Grace, and to the chairwoman for being here. I'm coming to you from PS 173 in Fresh Meadows. And when I asked them if there was a place that I could get on the Zoom, they were like, don't even try the broadband because it's just not going to work out for you. But here I am with all of you. I will be brief and just echo the sentiments of my colleagues about access and affordability, making sure that they go hand in hand. We're very lucky in New York that billions of dollars are going to be trickling in to every part of the state for broadband. And with that comes a really big opportunity for all of us to say, let's make sure that we're doing this in the most efficient and best way possible for every community. We need to have oversight of where those public funding dollars go and how they're utilized, right? This is a once in a generation opportunity, and we need to ensure that we're doing it not just expeditiously, but in the right, thoughtful way. I'm here to stand with all of you and say we're gonna do oversight. We're gonna have those hearings. We're gonna have more conversations. Because this is really what it's all about. So thank you to the chair and Congresswoman for literally pulling up these seats for us to sit at a table together and have these discussions. It's really great to be with all of you.
Thank you so much, Neely. Next, we have Assemblywoman Pamela Hunter from Central New York, whose district includes portions of Syracuse and surrounding towns. Thank you, Assemblywoman.
Thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Chairwoman. Congratulations to you. It's wonderful to see we're talking about a subject where many times we would not have even been in the room, let alone at the table or pulling up a folding chair. So I like to see strong women talking about important issues. So congratulations to you and thank you for the invitation to participate. As the Congresswoman mentioned, I do represent one of the most diverse districts in the state of New York. I have urban, the city of Syracuse. I have suburban. I do represent 3 towns, rural as well. I have dairy farms. I have apple farms in my district. Also, the Native American reservation, the Onondaga Nation in my district as well. So there's definitely diversity in the district I represent. As my colleagues have underscored, access to broadband is considered an essential service for accessing education, resources, as well as economic opportunities. And despite this great progress in expanding access to broadband, there have been many, many left behind. And although some services may be available, affordability is often a barrier for access. The emergency broadband benefit likely did assist many households and continues to provide an affordable option through its transition to the Affordable Connectivity Program. I'm pleased to see this extension of this program in continuing broadband bill credits. That's essential. However, I do believe that an expansion of eligibility, an amount of credit should be considered. So that's something I think we should take a look at. My district also has the highest concentration of poverty among people of color in the entire country in a census tracts in Central New York. And when remote learning started, students in these communities were much less likely to have the necessary devices and broadband access required to meaningfully engage in instruction. We saw this for 2 years. It's been an increasing problem, and nearly 2 years later, it's apparent to everyone that the education gap between those in low income communities and their peers from high income families, I have all of that in the district, the gap has greatly widened. Broadband affordability and access, root causes for this gap. I know many people have mentioned it today, and we can't underscore its importance. The access will improve employment outcomes also for our working adults. As Senator Ryan mentioned, we're working at home. I'm actually in the office today, but Senator Ryan mentioned he's working at home. We can't use, two folks can't actually be on Zoom at the same time. That broadband bandwidth is absolutely a problem. And then you have all the devices and your kids are gaming. This is essentially a huge problem. I think we need to absolutely support Build Back Better. We need to make sure that we get this going, that the money's flowing. This infrastructure project will be huge for all of our communities. In the state legislature, all of my colleagues have great bills to help us at the state level. We need to get them behind and get behind them and prioritize them. This is not a problem to kick down the road, to kick the can down the road. We have to take care of this problem right now. Our young people deserve it. We need it desperately right now. And many municipalities post-pandemic will have exhausted their ARPA funds, and some of these projects outside of what BBB is supposed to do, municipalities may not have the funds to be able to do this. We need to be smart with the monies that are allocated. We need to make sure that the projects are done thoroughly so that there's not opportunity to have to go back and fix problems, dig once, get it done right. And this will absolutely enhance our communities. And thank you very much for your time and invitation for me to participate today.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. Two more speakers, and to close out all of our state legislators is Assemblyman Pat Burke, who represents the Buffalo area. Thank you, Assemblyman, for being so patient.
Oh, thank you, Congresswoman, and thank you, Chairwoman, for having me here. I'm happy to be the closer. Unfortunately, I missed a good portion of the discussion because the internet in my office crashed. So one of my staffers has one of these mobile whatever, so I'm here with you. So thank you. My background in this, I was elected in 2013 to local county legislature. In 2014, my big initiative was to get universal broadband in Erie County. So a large urban county in New York State, unfortunately had several geographic and economic dead zones. So we did a white paper out of my office, and you could see, just swaths of area. Unfortunately, one of them, like Assemblymember Hunter had mentioned, I think it was the Oneida or the Indian reservation in her district. We have the same problem. The big part of the geographic dead zone were the reservations, and it is a continuing problem across the country, but it's a problem in New York State. So we set out to sort of see what the fiber assets we had in Erie County, and lo and behold, Erie County was loaded. There was fiber everywhere. It was just no one connected it. And so fortunately, through a long, years and years and years of work, there's now ErieNet that is trying to be an umbrella, mitigate some of the risk for these private companies, and facilitate, internet access for everyone. So, looking at different models like Chattanooga, Tennessee, and others that have certainly made a lot of money and created a lot of access for for their people and for industry there has been a huge boon. And, I'd certainly like to see that develop and grow. So anything we can do, I will continue to work, with my colleagues. It's great to see everybody. And I'll kick it back to Congresswoman Meng.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. And last but definitely not least, we have a representative from Senator Parker's office, Abule Balo. I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong, the Senator's Committee Director. Thank you for being here with us.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman, Chairwoman, and all other state legislators. I am Senator Parker's Committee Director, and pleasure to meet you all. And like Congresswoman said, Senator Parker represents the 21st District of Brooklyn, the second best borough. And our issues right now are dealing with as everyone else echoed, are dealing with connectivity, access, most important, access. And COVID showed us how important that was. I am now the new chair, the new committee director, and getting to this position, access to broadband helped me get here. So it's very important that we make sure all those kids in those positions have an opportunity to make sure they can do their work at home, especially during COVID. So we've received a lot of assistance during COVID from the federal. We'd like to receive a little bit more and make sure that we can pay all these arrears. A lot of arrears are mounted, and we don't know if the corporations, if they want to pay anything, if the companies want to pay. So we need to make sure we can get them to pay or get some federal money and some incentive to pay, something in taxations. And I think that comes with getting more data on what happened during COVID. So Senator Parker has a bill that we're circulating now that we want to make sure we get more data on the utilities and what's going on and what happened during COVID and with the arrears and every other constituent and consumer. So we want to make sure that we can get that bill through. Another thing is making sure we get more money again for the arrears. So thank you again for having me speak on this. And the sentiment, as everyone else said, we have to make sure we fix this because it will lead to generational poverty, and we don't want to keep these people in generational poverty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abule, for your great work. Well, this concludes our panel today. Thank you to everyone who was able to tune in. Thank you so much to our state legislators, my colleagues, for your tremendous work. Really hope that this is just the beginning of many conversations and partnerships that we'll have going forward on this important issues. We want as many New Yorkers and fellow Americans to know about the great work that you're all doing. So feel free to reach out as we continue to partner together. Thank you so much again to our chairwoman for your valuable partnership with us, for generously donating your time on a Friday for our panel here. Thank you for your great work, and we look forward to continuing to work with all of you. This concludes our event. If people have additional concerns or questions or want to book any of our special guests on a future event, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.